Bom dia a todos. Good morning, bonjour, buenos dias. Bem-vindos aos Açores e bem-vindos ao Museu Carlos Machado. Welcome to the Azores and to the Carlos Machado Museum. Mr. President of Açores Government, Dr. José Manuel Bolgueiro, Excellency, Madam Secretary of State for the Sea, Dra. Lídia Balcão, Madam Secretary of Malvinas, Antarctica, Ocean Policy and South Atlantic, Embaixadora Paula Di Chiaro, gracias por estar con nosotros. Honorable ambassadors, esteemed representatives of civilian and military entities, distinguished speakers, auditors, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me first and foremost publicly thanks to the Azores government once more for its unwavering support. I'm certain that our partnership will continue to be prosperous and committed to the link us towards to the development of a community that shares across the Atlantic Basin the same aspiration we hold. Mr. President, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to address you in this open ceremony of the 5th Maritime Security Course under the topic of climate change and security challenge in the Atlantic. A topic of the utmost importance to all Atlantic coastal states and islands, but also to the broader international community. Before I share with you briefly the reason our signatory states approved this topic, I must also commend and thank our trust partners and friends at the, for instance, Portuguese Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Luso-American Development Foundation. I think I see here the President Nuno Moraes Sarmento. No, I don't see it because of the lights. And the Enhanced Maritime Action, Evelyn, I don't know if you are here. Oh, yes, Evelyn, thank you. And the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. Where is John Hans? I don't see it. It's not arrived yet. Dear friends, your support is the bedrock of what we must treasure at the Atlantic Center, a cohesive and dedicated community that cooperative address today common challenge. Our partnership are a testament for this ideal, and we can only aspire for them to continue to developing accordingly. A word of gratitude to our partners at the African Atlantic States Process Initiative. Tariq, you are there? Oh, okay, take it. The Gulf of Guinea Maritime Institute, Admiral Yakubu, thank you very much to be with us at the Azores. The Policy Center of the New South, Dries, where is Dries? Thank you, Dries. And the Air Center, Mafalda, I saw already you. Okay, Mafalda, you are there. And the Institute for Security Studies, David William. Where is David? It's not arriving. I don't see it. It's over there. Hi, David. And finally, to the Museum Carlos Machado, Dr. João Constâncio, thank you very much, to all whom I express my appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, it wouldn't have been an Atlantic Center event if I hadn't acknowledged our Atlantic footprint here today. I don't want to target specific countries since we are here all on equal footing, but I must highlight the positive trajectory we are collectively trailing. To the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, to Argentina Republic, to Dominicana Republic, to the Panama Republic, dear friends, I welcome to this Atlantic community. We are now 27 countries. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, it is not by chance that if you look across the room, you will see more than one region of the Atlantic Basin represented here, West Africa, South America, the Caribbean, North America, and Europe. All of us are here today, united under one mutual goal: to understand our common heritage, to collectively discuss in what ways we can uphold it and develop it. Ladies and gentlemen, the importance of this vast Atlantic space is widely recognized for the development of a sustainable economy in coastal states and island nations. And with that, we talk about natural resources, we talk about the marine environment sustainability, we talk about trade, we talk about energy, and we talk about digital convergence. However, the Atlantic Basin must be also understood as a complex and evolving security space marked by unpredictability that spans the entire region. It serves as a backdrop for a range of risks and threats that can challenge international law and impact human security. In this context, the coast or shoreline has a boundary that becomes superficial, as insecurity on land and at sea is deeply interconnected through transnational flows. Dear Atlantic community, climate change is one of those shared risks disrupting the Atlantic space, threatening human security, imposing a significant geopolitical and geostrategic challenge, both today and tomorrow. It is increasingly recognized as a matter of national, regional, and global security, and it's causing an increase in occurrence of extreme weather events which have severe impact on coastal and islands communities. These situations, ladies and gentlemen, will represent the new normal to which countries will need to adapt, bringing new challenge for local and regional crisis response mechanisms, requiring a new perspective that fuels society to become more resilient. Assuming that there is no definitive knowledge and that is necessary to maintain constant updates, with pragmatic research, and I stress again, with pragmatic research that values the ability to transform the results obtained into useful and applicable actions. At the same time, digital transformation allows for better information to be obtained to support security measures and emergency response. This is improved, and here in this room we have several examples, by programs that support the monitoring of marine ecosystem, the observation of coastal areas, and the assessment of impact of climate change on sea levels. It is therefore also not by chance that climate change was identified by our signatory states as the issue to be addressed this year. Climate change is a whole-of-Atlantic risk, unequal in scale, unpredictable in its effects, yet universally felt in one form or another. Consider the Arctic. This year witnessed not only the second lowest sea ice volume of record, but also the 10th warm air temperature. In addition, just this past spring, snow levels declined across nearly the entire perimeter of the Arctic. And that brings news opportunity, but also brings to us challenge, for instance, in the maritime safety and security. Furthermore, it's not only the environmental and biodiversity impacts of this change that should underscore the urgency for concrete and immediate actions. For instance, let's let's now travel south to the megacities of the broader Gulf of Guinea, where a significant population increase is projected by the next decades. The low-lying and urbanized West Africa coast is among the most vulnerable regions in the world to hazards driven by socio-economic development and climate change. The phenomenon of coastalization, combined with the already visible and projected rise in sea levels, this trend poses a serious risk to livelihoods of coastal communities and presents an important test to the resilience of maritime critical infrastructures. Ladies and gentlemen, our voyage will not end here. Let us sail to, and sorry if I use the naval language, but let us sail to Western Atlantic, namely to the Caribbean region. In 2024, the region witnessed the formation of Hurricane Beryl, the first Category 4 hurricane to pass over the islands of San Vicente and Grenadines and Grenada. Among us today are several representatives from that region who certainly attest to the sheer scale and violence of that storm. But more recently, in April 2025, an unprecedented storm affected an important commercial port city in Argentina, Bahia Blanca, a beautiful place which became a good example of how interagency cooperation is essential for crisis response. Ladies and gentlemen, the battle that we face today is not only to mitigate and adapt to the effects of extreme weather events, but also to discover alternative pathways that allow us to truly change the tide and increase resilience when exposed to climate-related hazards. Excellencies, right here, and Mr. President, thank you for the initiative. The region of the Azores, the largest marine protected areas network in North Atlantic, was recently established, ensuring a crucial step forward in marine conservation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Atlantic Center community, please once again excuse me my Navy jargon. But this week, we will say north, south, east, and west, bringing a high-level group of speakers to better understand the manifestations of climate change and its implication across the Atlantic. With the insights of distinguished speakers and the active engagement of all of you, I'm certain we will leave the heart of the Atlantic with a clear vision of what still needs to be done to collectively tackle the heavy task before us. I'm confident that the sovereign reality of what lies ahead will not discourage us, but rather strengthen our resolve to forge a future human development and ocean healthy advance together, not in opposition. Let us leave these waters with a renewed purpose anchored in political dialogue, supporting science and knowledge, guided by cooperation and driven by the conviction that together we can turn the tide. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is undoubtedly our duty to contribute to an ocean that united us. No country can face such numerous and complex challenges alone. Once again, the response must be collaborative. Thank you for coming to the Azores. Thank you for all commitment and enjoy, of course, the course and enjoy the Azores. Thank you very much.
Bom dia a todas e a todos. Buenos dias. Bonjour. Good morning. A warm welcome to everyone here in Azores. It's a pleasure. It is with a great pleasure that the autonomous region of the Azores hosts yet another initiative of the Atlantic Center, the Maritime Security Course, now in its 5th edition. Doutora Lídia Bulcão, Secretary of State of Maritime Affairs, Doutora Paola Di Chiaro, Secretary of the Falkland Islands, South Atlantic and Antarctica of the Government of the Argentine Republic, it is an honor to welcome to the Azores a member of the government of a country of great importance to the Atlantic Ocean as Argentina. Thank you. Admiral Nuno Noronha Bragança, Distinguished Coordinator of the Atlantic Center, meu caro, é gosto. Caro Dr. Nuno Moraes Sarmento, President of the Luso-American Foundation, Operational Commander of the Azores, General César Rodrigues, representing the Chief of Staff of the Portuguese Armed Forces, Commander of the Maritime Zone of the Azores, Commodore Paulo Jorge Conceição Lopes, representing the Chief of Staff of the Navy, distinguished participants in the 5th Maritime Security of the Course of Atlantic Center, permitam-me que, allow me that destaque Juiz-Presidente da Comarca dos Açores, aqui presente, Sr. Procurador em representação da Secção Regional do Tribunal de Contas. The Atlantic is the home of Azores. 9 islands scattered over 600 kilometers in the middle of the ocean are the foundation of a community of people who, over the past 6 centuries, have asserted a very distinct identity, the result of an intimate relationship between the islands and the sea. Our sea connects us to the world. It provides us with part of the income that fuels our progress. That is why we treat it as one of our greatest assets and heritage we will never cease to preserve. And we have examples of preservation. Therefore, it is in its defense, the military protection that ensures a sovereignty, and in its management, the management of the marine resources that contributes to the economic and social development that we must focus, especially in times of uncertainty regarding the international order and respect of the international law. This meeting, promoted by the Atlantic Center in a partnership with the prestigious international institutions, represents a fundamental milestone in the joint reflection of the challenge that climate change imposes on maritime security in the Atlantic space. Portugal is a state with one of the largest exclusive economic zones in the world, and the Azores play a decisive role in its maritime and Atlantic dimension of our country, Portugal. Our geostrategic location in the middle of the North Atlantic is not just a geographic feature, but also a responsibility that we assume seriously in the face of the global challenge we encounter. Climate change today represents a multidimensional threat encompassing political, legal, economic, and security risks. Its transnational nature underlines its status as an effective threat that requires a coordinated and comprehensive response from all Atlantic countries. In the Azores, in the middle of this Atlantic, we are particularly aware of this reality as we face extreme weather events and changes in the marine ecosystems directly. The government of the Azores has led significant efforts in the protection of marine resources through the Blue Azores program and the expansion of the Marine Protected Areas Network, one of the largest in the world. We do this based in solid scientific information and in close collaboration with all users of the sea. At the same time, we have strengthened our maritime surveillance capabilities through strategic partnerships with the Navy and the National Maritime Authority, using advanced monitoring systems to ensure the protection of our waters. Well, this course, which begins today, represents a unique opportunity to strengthen capacities and promote solutions that reinforce respect for the international law in the maritime context. Maritime security is not only a matter of defense, but also of sustainable development and environmental protection. I'm certain that discussions taking place here in the coming days will contribute significantly to a shared vision of the challenges we face and the solutions we must implement. The destruction of the oceans and maritime insecurity would have devastating impacts not only on the Azorean economy, but on all coastal communities of the Atlantic, as we see in that map. The future of our seas depends on our ability to cooperate and our determination to protect this vital resource for humanity. The political phenomenon associated with the management and protection to the ocean is not a national phenomenon. It requires a sharing of responsibilities with the international community, with particular emphasis on the coastal states in promoting security. My final words go to the coordinator of the Atlantic Center, Admiral Nuno. The fact that the government of Portugal has decided to base the Atlantic Center in Terceira Islands here in Azores is, in our view, a clear sign of Portugal's commitment to the policy of protecting the Atlantic Ocean, both in terms of military security and in matters of environmental protection and combating climate change. I also highlight the association of 22 Atlantic coastal states, from the Arctic to the Antarctica, in the objective of ensuring a clean and safe ocean. The close relationship that the Atlantic Center maintains with my government also represents the importance of the involvement of regional authorities in building international cooperation process, which are essential to pursuing common objectives among members of the international community. I wish you all a fruitful and enriching course, reaffirming the Azores' commitment to be an active and responsible partner in the protection of the Atlantic and the promotion of the maritime security in the face of the challenge of climate changes. Azores are the sea. The sea is Azores. We all are the ocean. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Government of Azores will now have to leave, and we will proceed for our roundtable. Sir, thank you very much. State Secretary Paola, you can stay. Sorry. Okay, so thank you very much for all. We will now start the roundtable for this opening ceremony. I will have to call the participants to set up the headsets on the back near the technical team that are waiting. So as moderator, I have the pleasure to call my dear friend, Navy Captain João Fonseca Ribeiro. Sir, thank you very much. On the back for the headset, they set up the headset. Former Minister of Guinea-Bissau, Suzy Barbosa. Thank you very much, Madam. Professor Andreas Kramer. Thank you very much, sir. And then I think you already have the headset. I invite you to take the stage already. You're the first one, you're all set. Thank you very much. Please. Where you want, sir. Onde quiseres. And I'm missing Admiral Yakubu. Vice Admiral Yakubu.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, the theme for this roundtable is Climate Change in the Atlantic, a Threat Without Borders. We have now an hour and a half to a fruitful discussion. We will start with a brief introduction from Captain Fonseca Ribeiro, and then I will leave you all in his very competent hands. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. Miss Secretary of State of the Sea, Miss Secretary of State representing the government of Argentina, dear ambassadors, military and civilian authorities here present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's for me a pleasure and an honor for the third time to be present and to collaborate with Maritime Security Course of the Atlantic Center. Today, it's even a more privileged moment because I have the opportunity to be together with friends from a long time in the development of these ideas that are in our decision-making processes today, but not just, also on development, also on conservation measures. And well, this is an opportunity to discuss cross-cutting impacts of climate change across the Atlantic region, emphasizing shared vulnerabilities of coastal and island nations, regardless geography or development level. And well, when we speak about climate change in the Atlantic, a threat without borders, I have also to add a threat without limits too, because it goes far beyond borders and the concept goes also to limits. And there is an area beyond those limits which also internationally we have to address together. But the very reason of collaboration, it drives from an issue or a set of issues coming from what I consider a state of need from civilization. We have the need for energy resources. We have the need for protein, either fishing or aquaculture, or even biotechnology associated. We have the need for minerals. We have the need for water. We have the need for connectivity. Either we address mobility of platforms or mobility of individuals. But also, we have to address information inclusiveness and knowledge sharing. And if we put all together in a melting pot, yes, either we can be all collaborating peacefully together, or sometimes we challenge the limits about what could be a threat. Extreme events is a natural result of something that for the most of times go beyond our capacity of control. But when we speak about climate adaptation, for instance, yes, this is our responsibility. And we are acknowledging along the time that environmental constraints to our wish, to our will to develop, need always to be properly addressed, wherever we call it climate change or the need to fight environmental issues, not necessarily colliding immediately with climate. One of the ideas that perhaps in future will rise is that in fact climate is very much an interaction between atmosphere and ocean. We speak very much about conservation of oceans, but when we speak about the atmosphere, well, it's still a little bit aside. We speak about emission control for the quality of air, but not necessarily we associate this interaction with the ocean. So quality of air and quality of the marine waters, they need to go side by side. And without further ado, and having all those challenges together, we have different geographies to address, and each geography has its own reality. There is no sole solution to solve the problems of the world. Globally, it's a combination and the integration of acting together, but acknowledging the reality of the territories and the way the problems should be addressed on this sort of bottom-up or strategic bottom-up approach to a sole end result. And without further ado, I will invite Dan Hamilton from it's the president. I should know this by memory, of course, but it's the president of the Transatlantic Leadership Network, an organization to whom I collaborate for a couple of years. And it's a pleasure to have you here, Mr. President, and to address this knowledgeable audience about this topic. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, and it's a very great pleasure to be here. Admiral, thank you so much for the invitation. My colleagues, it's good to be with you. Well, it's very open-ended sort of beginning, so I don't know quite where to start. I think we're all here because of this interconnection. I think the reality we're facing is that I think, if we're honest, governments and societies still struggle with the resources you allocate to deal with these kinds of issues, which many still see as longer term, versus the pressing daily needs that they are faced with and where they have to allocate also resources. And so I think it's a struggle, and our politics are different, of course, in all of our societies. But if you look back, part of our work is to what we call the Atlantic Basin Initiative. It is to say, what's distinctive about the Atlantic? When we have traditionally said transatlantic, we actually mean North Atlantic. And yet the four continents of the Atlantic are now interacting in all sorts of ways that have escaped a lot of attention in the past. And our effort is to say we have to stop that and look at the full Atlantic, the pan-Atlantic, and how those interactions are changing not only the ocean, but also lots of other things that have some global impact. If you take climate, for instance, the Atlantic Ocean is the home of important carbon sinks that influence the world. So what we do in the Atlantic has a global impact. Someone in Singapore isn't going to spend that much time on it as someone here. So if we speak about the world ocean, it's still important to focus, and that the Atlantic has some distinguishing characteristics. So before getting to our current, since it's a sort of setup here, the Atlantic is the busiest ocean in the world. More commercial traffic in the Atlantic than any other ocean basin. That's not usually what people think if you read the headlines. So the emissions that come from commercial shipping, all of that have some impact here, and it's intense, but it's uneven within the Atlantic. It's the most digitally connected ocean in the world. The digital connections underneath the sea are the most dense anywhere, but they're uneven. The Atlantic is becoming an energy reservoir for the rest of the world, both from fossil fuel to fossil-free innovation. But again, it's uneven. And the real dynamic that we're seeing here is the Atlantic, the security challenges of the Atlantic, most of them I would sum up with what Admiral Nuno had said earlier about human security, the security of individuals and societies. Much of that security challenge is within the society. It's less conflicts between states, although we have them, but it's the conflicts that people have to deal with on an almost daily basis sometimes within their societies. So if you take all of that together, the Atlantic has a lot of going on. And yet, for some reason, we don't spend much time on the pan-Atlantic. So that is my pitch, is that we should try to connect more. That's what the Atlantic Center is doing. A lot of other initiatives, the African Coastal States Initiative, lots of things. But we need to do more of that, and we need to raise the perception. Because, my first point, governments are still struggling with how important this really is, given every other challenge. And since I might be the only U.S. speaker to come to you, at least now, we have to speak about the elephant in the room, which is, as we proceed on these challenges, we have to face the fact that at least for a number of years, the United States is going to leave some gaps for everyone else on these issues. That's based on the decisions this administration is taking. The U.S. is pulling out, or is either pulled out or is pulling out of the COP process, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 30, a number of other plurilateral international initiatives that have to do with climate change. They have rescinded the U.S. Navy's Climate Action Plan. The Secretary of Defense said we will not do, quote, climate crap. U.S. Secretary of Defense. So the resources that are being pulled away are going to leave holes. And again, Admiral's point earlier, and your point often, is it's not just about the pure security. So if you think about development assistance, and where the land meets the sea, back to human security, and how climate affects that. That means development assistance becomes really quite critical. And yet, again, the United States is basically eviscerated its development aid programs. So that's going to leave many gaps for countries that are the recipients, but it's going to put more burdens on other countries that have traditionally been the donors. So that adds to the trade-offs again of resources. So do you spend now money more on development assistance, or you continue your climate action because of this gap that's now unfolded? And I'm not sure if the political drive will, in fact, be the reality. It's the rhetoric, but you have to look at real things. So since 2022, the U.S. military has been engaged in 170 climate-related events around the world. 170. I can't imagine tomorrow they will stop. So somehow this will continue, but probably not at a high political level, but at a pragmatic, we have a challenge, we have to deal with it kind of issue, where again the context we have together will be very important. The other gap that's emerging, it's uncertain again how much that will be, is scientific capacity. The United States right now is cutting back on a good deal of its scientific capacity. It will affect how the U.S. helps others or maintains its own monitoring, its own scientific resources on climate and maritime security. It just will. So again, a hole will develop, and the question will be who's going to pick up or fill in that gap, or will no gap be filled in? The other, back to maritime security and climate, is simply the carbon footprint of the military. The Pentagon has more emissions. The carbon footprint of the U.S. Pentagon is more than 140 countries. Just the U.S. Defense Department, 140 countries. So if there's no push to pull back on those emissions, on that impact now, that'll continue. So not only are there big gaps, but there'll be further pressure on the climate itself because of the military, simply the impact of the military. And I do believe, given what I said at the beginning, that governments and societies are debating, that many societies and governments will choose to go along with the United States right now, or where they will question now. It's an easier now to question, but before was seen as more of a consensus. And so we will have some more turbulence politically in terms of the governance structures getting us from here to there. And that'll have huge impacts on how we can really think about a pan-Atlantic agenda. Let me leave it at there. I have to go back on it, but that's probably enough for now.
Okay, I will keep for the Q's and A's then, and about thinking about joint action and how can the U.S. be engaged, or U.S. citizens, U.S. capabilities, irrespective if they are public state lead or not. Well, now I will pass the word to Andreas Kramer. He is the founder of Ecologic, a German-based company which is focused on environmental topic. It was also a pleasure to meet Andreas a long time ago, I think in Project Calamare, which was supported by FLAD in 2012 or something of a kind. And since then you are engaged with the Blue Ocean Foundation, and well, we have you here, and it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to hear from you, your insights, your views, and also experiences and some insight for opportunities. Please.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this great place. I'm a German engineer, and I could speak about all the experiences that you just alluded to, but it occurred to me listening to the introductory speeches that there is an important voice missing in this room. and I would like to speak on behalf of the ocean. The ocean's point of view, that's the motto of the Oceano Azul Foundation. I think that is important. Somebody said this morning, the ocean is angry. Speaking as the ocean, all dressed in blue and full of fish, you call me angry, but that's your word. I am a force of nature. I don't have emotions. So if you call me angry, then that is actually the result of too much energy. It's the energy that comes from burning fossil fuels for the last 250 years. Most of the excess heat that generated by burning all that fuel that was buried in the ground, in part, by the way, by myself, that additional energy ended up 95% in me. I absorbed it. You worry about the atmosphere all the time. You think climate change. No, that's wrong. When you look at life on this planet, yes, there is the solid earth, the crust, it gives us gravity. It allows me, the liquid earth, to envelop it. And I created life here. Life started in me. You are my creations, you humans. Whenever you taste your blood, you taste the ocean, because the salinity of your blood is a memory of the fact that your life started in me. Life on land is something that I couldn't have done on my own. The ocean helped, the moon helped with that, because it gave us the tides, gave us the tidal pools. It allows life forms that have been created in the ocean to crawl onto the, survive in the tidal pools, to survive periods of being dry and eventually learning to conquer the land. The atmosphere is my creation as well. Somebody alluded to the fact that there is a constant exchange between me, the ocean, and the atmosphere. The atmosphere is my creation. It is as it is, with the oxygen in it and the nitrogen and all the rest of it, the carbon dioxide, because it interacts with me. The scientists here in the room, they do that. They look at the physical exchange between me and the atmosphere, at the energy that is transferred from in one or the other direction. And it looks at the gas exchange, how the carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, and sometimes I give it back when I get too warm, when I get too acidic in certain places, then yes, I will push some of the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. That's what I do. There's no ill will. I don't have emotions. I don't discriminate. I don't have friends. I don't have enemies. I just do what the forces of nature tell me to do. So that is my role here. What you humans do that makes me, in your words, angry, is something that you can stop and you should stop. I've spent millions of years taking carbon out of the surface of the planet and buried it underground. A lot of the processes have happened on land, yes, but a lot of them also happened on my seabed. I removed the carbon dioxide, and that allowed the Earth to cool to the point where you are now, where you have a stable life. You're disrupting that. You're disrupting that by burning the fossil fuels and making me angry, and I cannot take much more. We are coming to the limit of my absorption. I can no longer absorb all the carbon dioxide and all the additional heat that you have. I will release it back to you. And the increased temperature that will create will make changes. People talked about sea level rise here. 12 meters are now 12 meters above the current level of sea level are now unavoidable. It is up to you to make sure that I don't grow beyond that. I am perfectly happy to grow to 85 plus 90 meters. That's probably the limit that I will reach. Look at here. We are at the moment in this room, you are at plus 20 meters. Here you would still have dry feet if you work hard and you stop the burning of fossil fuels. Stop the burning of fossil fuels. Stop the pollution, injecting all these poisons into me. I'll give it back to you in the form of fish, and then the fish is no longer healthy. Stop destroying the natural ecosystems. The biology in me is so much more important than the chemistry or the physics of it. The carbon cycle, You think about gas exchanges. The carbon cycle is really a biological cycle. You need to understand that. The whaling, the extinction of the whales, the fishing, the overfishing, the destruction of the benthic ecosystems. Everywhere there is carbon, and where I have the capacity through life to bind carbon, stop destroying it. Stop touching my bottom. And if you do, if you help me rebuild that biology by leaving me alone, but also by helping me in some cases by seeding, for example, corals that are more heat resistant, you will be able to restore my ability to absorb the carbon. Then I can continue to help you manage the climate, but it will all be useless unless you stop. For you wearing military uniforms here, I may look like the enemy, because I will come and overrun all of your naval bases all within the same decade. And you will not have friends to help you when that happens, because I will overrun their bases as well. I will do it to everybody indiscriminately, all at the same time. You will have no friends anymore. You will have to defend yourself. Defending in this case means retreating, because I cannot be stopped. Prepare for that. Everybody, every nation, every city, every island, prepare for that. It's not something that I want to do. I have no will. I'm a force of nature. But that is something that is ahead of us, for me as the ocean expanding, for you as the humans having caused that and needing to prepare for it and respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ocean. Oh, sorry, Andreas. It is very, very good to see always the other side, not just as a consequence, but as a proactive individual. This is the type of situation in which we challenge also our limits in capacity in the case. Just a quick note, and I think Andreas and Dan know, civilization in the current years also did some incredible achievements. In fact, we were unable to solve the problem that ocean is reacting as such. But in 25 years, imagine what is the achievement of providing electricity to 30% more population in the world. In 25 years, the population increased in 30%, and we achieved the possibility to provide them electricity. Of course, there is no best solution on this. We have to balance, but it's a tremendous difficulty acknowledging exactly what Mr. Ocean said. But this is for the Q's and A's probably. And I will now pass the word to Vice Admiral Isa Yakubu. Thank you, Mr. Vice Admiral, for being present here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me also add my voice and thank Admiral Nunu and the Atlantic Center as a whole for, first of all, the honor of inviting me to be part of this very, very critical conversation that we'll be having over the next few days. And also the collaboration that we have had, the Gulf of Guinea Maritime Institute, of which I'm now the executive chairman. I just retired as chief of the Naval Staff of Ghana, and I now work with the Gulf of Guinea Maritime Institute, and we are great partners of the Atlantic Center in trying to resolve some of these issues. I want to look at this topic from the perspective of the Gulf of Guinea, one of the most vulnerable areas to all these Mr. Ocean's anger. If it's not anger, it's natural response to what we are doing as humans. We have heard you loud and clear, and we would do whatever we have to do, but the impact is great. From our perspective, the Gulf of Guinea is on the front lines of the climate change in the Atlantic. It includes coastal West Africa, the Gulf of Guinea, countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau. If I don't mention that, I'll be in trouble. And all the way, all the countries from Senegal all the way to Angola. We are now part of the geostrategic Gulf of Guinea. And we really feel the impact of this climate change, which brings about extreme weathers, other emergencies. So climate change here is, we all know, is transboundary, it's fast moving, and then it's also multidimensional, as has been presented so far. So the Atlantic drives ocean currents, rainfall patterns, storm systems in the region. And we know for us in the Gulf of Guinea, we are mostly agrarian. We engage a lot in farming, but we do rain-fed farming most of the time. The issue is because of the changing patterns in the climate. And just last year in Ghana, and I believe in other areas of the Africa in general, particularly the sub-Saharan Africa, I know we came out, our farmers came out, did their planting, knowing exactly when the rains normally set in. And after a month or two, no rain came, and they lost their seeds, and they didn't even know what to do. So these are issues we are dealing with on a daily basis. And we are aware of the sea surface warming, the effects of the monsoon rains, the harmattan winds that come from the Sahara, as well as the cyclones formations that are created as a result of the natural forces of the oceans. So, and we also know it is vital for fishing. It was mentioned about what the products of the ocean are, and protein, as we know, is one great resource of the oceans. And in Ghana, our fishery consumption, 60% of our protein intake comes from fish, so it's very important to us. These days, our fishermen, particularly the artisanal ones, they go out for days. They used to go out in the morning, in the evening, come out in the morning with large catches. This time, they go out for days and they come back only with plastic substances in their nets. And these are all human actions that have affected our livelihoods. And these are things that are transnational. We don't know where the plastics are. It could come from us. It could also be coming from neighboring areas that have washed all the way into our waters. So energy supplies, as we know, is becoming big in the Gulf of Guinea, as it has been stated, and all these climatic issues are affecting our ability to, because we are now developing, and energy supplies are critical. We have a big gap in our energy needs in order to industrialize. How do we get it? Do we stop using fossil fuel? Or how fast can we develop renewables to replace fossil fuels when we haven't even gotten it right using these fossil fuels? So these are very important issues for our region. We're comparing development to protecting the climate. How do we balance the two? And this has been a conversation that has always been ongoing. Some of the impacts of climate change in our region is what we call the coastal erosion, and because of rising sea levels. I had some photos I would have shown if we had projection, but I believe we can all see them on the internet and other things. As I was coming here, there was big discussion about the effect of tidal waves taking over communities in Ghana and creating what we call climate refugees. People losing their homes, their farms, critical infrastructure being consumed, and a whole lot of other things that are already in short supply that we are also losing. And then I've talked about disrupted marine ecosystems which threaten our food security. How do we even deal with marine invasive species that are swept from other areas into our waters? Destruction of our ecosystem, the mangroves particularly in Guinea-Bissau, which gives us the best fish in the world today, are going. How do we protect these mangroves and all that? These are all very critical issues. And then saltwater intrusion into our freshwater systems because of rising sea levels is also a critical issue that we have to deal with. So the social and economic consequences are many. I don't want to delve into them now, just want to give a general overview. When we come into the interactive session, we can talk about them. But we have displacement of coastal communities, which have created climate refugees, damage to critical infrastructure. This is what is causing conflicts in our region as well, because of competition over scarce resources, particularly you've heard about what's happening in the Sahel region and all that. So it's creating conflicts and we have to deal with them. So I want to say climate impacts cut across national boundaries. We have a common river, River Volta, which I'll be talking on Thursday when we talk about response, because it created a major emergency in Ghana. But every year, Burkina Faso, which is in the northern part of Ghana, has a dam on that river, which flows into the sea through Ghana. And every year, when the water level in their dam rises, they call it the Bagre Dam, they have to spill the excess water to protect their dam. And this causes flooding in Ghana. It doesn't even cause flooding in Burkina, and we have to deal with it. And it's huge, so it's something that we are discussing among the countries. So we think that the effects ripple across both the West Africa, Central Africa, which are part of the Gulf of Guinea. What is our role? What should we do as Gulf of Guinea states? We have to lead in regional data sharing and monitoring, because climate change is transboundary, as we say, it has no borders. Invest in climate-resilient infrastructure, leverage on multilateral organizations and our regional bodies like the ECOWAS, the ECAS, and the African Union and the United Nations platforms, because we still need a lot of collaboration to be able to deal with this. So, and adapting to the shared threat, strengthen our early warning systems, and integrate climate risk planning. We can't do individual national planning. It has to be regional and maybe global in terms of our planning to deal with these systems. Promote sustainable blue economy strategies. People want the economy, so they are doing a lot at ocean, which is the ocean is getting angry and giving it back to us. Empower our communities through education, relocation, and livelihoods. The impact will help them, as you know, by education, to do good practices that will help our environment, particularly the oceans. So in conclusion, I want to say that the Gulf of Guinea is both a victim and a front line in climate response. Atlantic connects us through the shared risk, which we have all discussing here today. So climate change is a threat without borders and needs a united response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you so much. Just a quick note on the sequence of the previous notes. We spoke about the achievement of providing electricity, but we have 6 million, around 600 million people in Africa without electricity still. And when we speak also about the coastline of the 4 continents, we have around 400 million youngsters waiting for new opportunities. And they are citizens of Earth also to have a dialogue with Mr. Ocean on these issues and future options and solutions and action. Well, but without further ado, I will pass the word to Dr. Suzy Barbosa. She was a former Minister of Foreign Affairs from Guinea-Bissau. Please, Suzy.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by thanking Nuno Noronha Bragança for inviting me in the name of Atlantic Center to be here today. And I believe you must say, what is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs doing here? She's not related to maritime issues. She's not in this area or this team. But I believe you know that diplomacy is very connected to defense issues, to maritime defense, to maritime security. And I believe with the experience I had, I can also give some recommendations. And because today in this panel we had already visions from different continents. We had from the United States, we had this morning from Europe and from the Azores, we had from the ocean, and we already had from Africa, especially from my region, because I also come from the Gulf of Guinea, as my colleague said before, and I also have the same reality. So I'm not going to repeat what he already said. So what I'm going to do here today, I think, is take the opportunity to bring us all together to find solutions and recommendations. What can we do? Are we going to still do the same thing and still angry the sea? Are we going to go on damaging our climate? I think this is the opportunity, and I think the Atlantic Center has a big chance of making a difference. Why? Guinea-Bissau, as you may know, is one of the co-founders of the Atlantic Center. In 2021, I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs when Minister Carvinho invited us to take part of this treaty. Immediately we accepted because we realized the importance of this kind of treaties, being us also a coastal country. And now I will apologize as a Lusophone. I think I'm the only Lusophone in this table. No, not counting with you, of course, of the speakers. So I will have to read some, because if it would be in Portuguese, I would be very fluent. But in English, I don't want to lose the content of what I want to say you. So I apologize, I will have to read in order to transmit exactly what I think should be the role of the Atlantic Center in order to help us reduce the impact of the climate changes in our coastal area countries. So as I was saying, the Atlantic region, comprising the diverse coastal nations, has many common challenges. And these common challenges are already mentioned here. So among others, these common problems of coastal countries have to do with the climate change. So what can we do? What can be done, especially by the Atlantic Center, in order to prevent this in the future? So I would like to start by saying that I believe that the Atlantic Center, established by 16 countries by them, if I'm not mistaken, which was an initiative from Portugal, can play a crucial role addressing the challenges posed by the climate changes in our Atlantic Ocean. The responsibilities initiatives can significantly contribute to fostering the international cooperation, advancing scientific understanding, and implementing sustainable solutions. How? As former ministers, as I said, we signed this agreement believing that this would be a solution for us. We are a small country, we don't have much means, but we believe we have to have collective answers. So small countries like us can join bigger countries in the same, having the same problems and finding common solutions, collective solutions that really can make a difference. So I strongly believe that the best contribution today we can have is to give suggestions and recommendations how we have to prevent this from happening. So the first thing we believe, and I'm speaking not only as Suzy Barbosa, but also from Guinea-Bissau's position when we did sign this agreement, is that the Atlantic Center can start by facilitating the international cooperation between the member countries, because it can serve as a hub for coordination among the Atlantic bordering countries by promoting dialogue and collaboration, but also by bringing together nations from North, South America, from Europe, from Africa, and from the Caribbean, in order for us to present common problems, but also to find collective solutions, by also developing joint strategies for climate mitigation and adaptation. This includes harmonizing policies, sharing best practices, coordinating emergency response efforts to extreme weather events. Another second thing could be done is by promoting scientific research and data searching, and also by promoting sustainable marine and coastal management, And I'm not developing these issues because I want to give the chance my colleagues to speak again, but I will be delighted to develop them if you want, by supporting capacity building education, like you are going to do this week, by effectively combating climate change, local communities and government. They need capacity building. It's very important, this kind of initiative, and I think it's very important to invite the member countries in order for them to have this capacity building, in order to have resilience and sustainable practices. The fifth advice I would give is also by mobilizing funding and resources, because you cannot do these changes, you cannot implement without funding and resources. And sixth and last, by advocating for a policy development. The Atlantic Center can serve as an advocate for a robust climate change policy in a regional and also in an international level. So I think this is the opportunity. And I may say, I'm quite happy to be here today because it's like being part of the solution, being part of this collective answer. In conclusion, I would like to say that we, Guinea-Bissau, as member country, we believe that the Atlantic Center has the potential of being a cornerstone in the fight against the climate change in the Atlantic Ocean. It is a role of fostering cooperation, as I said, advancing scientific research, promoting sustainable practices, and mobilizing resources, which is crucial. Given the climate change as being a transboundary issue, the Center's efforts can transform shared challenges into collective solutions, emphasizing this in safeguarding the Atlantic as a shared responsibility that requires unified action across borders. Why? Because we may have conferences, we may have roundtables, but we need action. What's going to change is really the action. So I think the Atlantic Center has the opportunity of implementing this action, of building capacity to the member countries, and finally start by making the difference. So I will stop by here, and I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Susie. Well, now I will start a short period of questions to the speakers, and then I will pass to the floor of the audience for some additional questions. I pinpointed took some notes about what my perception was of the points the speakers addressed. Well, we have an unbalanced basin in terms of the way they respond, the way they have their current capabilities. So we have to fight imbalances. It's something that it is tremendously obvious. We have to streamline options in order to align ideas, align principles, but acknowledging that, well, geography is everything geographically dependent, so there is no one solution for the whole problem, but there is a contribution of geographically specific solutions to the whole problem. Here we have a big constraint. Research, monitoring, activity at sea is very costly. We have to find more cheaper science, more cost-effective options to, in fact, be a basin option achievable by the territories, so to say. Rising perception, Mr. Ocean, thank you very much for that quite impressive and strong note from Mr. Ocean. Development assistance, capacity building, from science to governance management of issues, of subjects, to the way activities are properly done. Collective solutions. Again, very tricky between a one solution fits everything is not necessarily that, but the major principles need to be reflected. And, well, we have to organize, we have to plan on the ocean, we have to invest on a big view of maritime spatial planning. Maybe this is an opportunity to understand that this starts on land as an interconnectivity, an interfacing between land and sea, and then there is the big ocean, the high seas, the deep sea. So without further ado, then about joint action and about what we may call basin collaboration. Some suggestions.
Well, again, there are many things we could say these would be nice to do. I just come back to my point that we're in a period right now where I think most leaders need to look at the plans they had and say, how will the fact that the U.S. is going to step back from many of its commitments or funding affect your plan? What gap is that going to produce for you? For some countries, maybe nothing, but for other countries, could be very significant. How will that affect your plan, and how can you adjust that plan now? Because this will continue for some time. And who can you go to if you need more help if it's not the United States? So the European Union, frankly, I think is under some pressure to step up and fill in some gaps that it probably hadn't planned on. And that comes back to, again, trade-offs within intra-EU debates about where the priorities are. It would seem to me you would be able to connect better across the Atlantic South. It would seem to me there are opportunities for exchange of good practice, best practice between Africa and South American countries. Much of what you said about those who are not connected, there are also hundreds of millions of people in South America who are not connected either digitally or to energy. And so finding those common spaces, I think, would be useful. I think the Northern European and the Northern Atlantic countries can help facilitate those dialogues, but in the end, it has to be their own dialogue. It can't be something put on. Often my experience, the Northern colleagues come with expensive solutions, right? And so we're back to capacity building. So I think these gaps are going to happen. They're going to be uneven, but they're coming at you if they haven't already. So how do you deal with that? How does that affect your current planning and future planning? Where can you look for other partners to diversify your relationships? In the Atlantic space offers a good way to think about that. And then how do you go beyond the government-to-government idea? I think especially in these areas, as you said, there are good opportunities for cooperation on marine spatial planning. That was identified by the Partnership for Atlantic Cooperation as a major initiative by the countries, particularly of the Southern Atlantic. So that seems to me, by working on pragmatically, not politically, but pragmatically, that might be something that can move forward in lots of very practical help. The related is marine information systems, which gives you the picture of what you need, and that I think is similar. I think where the conversation was a year or so ago, pushing the envelope, was on maritime domain awareness. Yep. That is, can you create fusion centers where you have a real, integrated effort? There are those fusion centers everywhere else in the world except in the Atlantic. I don't understand why we can't figure this out. The Pacific, they have all sorts of these. And even in the Indian Ocean, they have much more going on than in the Atlantic. Is it ideology? Is it capacity? There's something missing here that we could easily work on, it seems to me. And the U.S. would not have to take the lead on that. Frankly, Brazil strikes me as a great opportunity for the Brazilians to show some leadership with something like that. Or, the Atlantic Center, the Portuguese. I mean, somebody else has to step up now. That's, I think, the basic message. And focus on that. And look at networks. The Atlantic Basin Initiative, everything we do is a network. You mentioned, I run called the Transatlantic Leadership Network. I think networks are the future, not state to state only. So there are networks of coastal cities that have to deal with very similar problems. And you get the mayors of those cities or the regional governors together, they get it. And they have very practical things to talk to each other about, and they have good exchanges. So anything to do to facilitate those types of exchanges rather than try to keep everything always at the national level would be good. I've talked to many governors in Brazil, for instance. They're all for it. The central government might be less enthusiastic, but they are, they're on the front line, as you said. Who's on the front line? Who else is on the front line? And get the front line states, or communities together to exchange that type of practice. I think that's the period we're in right now. It's not, unfortunately, not going to be one that gets us from here to deal with everything Andreas said. But it's the reality, I think, of where we are. So we have to get through that period and look down and look for practical solutions. Look for where those gaps are going to hit you and how you can deal with those, because I think that's, over the next period of time, is what we're going to deal with.
Thank you, Dan. Sometimes a small, efficient solution could be the beginning of a basin planning as a tool. We don't need to have the major project. A simple project can generate a very good basin planning on collaboration. Now, Andreas, very much on the same lines. What is the opinion and what is the suggestion for the ocean, for Mr. Ocean, to say to the mankind what should be done?
Looking at the ocean, at humans, I do not understand your system of capitalism. It strikes me as odd, because the cheapest energy you have at the moment is photovoltaics and wind power on land. You don't need to put the wind turbines into the shallow waters, disturbing me and disturbing the bottom and disturbing the life underneath and all the additional infrastructure you need, the cables and the stations and things like that. You have enough space on land. Your landlubbers use the space on land and leave me alone. What I don't understand is why, in this time when it is actually everywhere in the world cheaper to build a new energy system on photovoltaics and on wind power and on smart energy system with storage. That is cheaper to build it new than to operate the old fossil energy system. And yet, your system that you call capitalism, and you treat it almost like a god, that system of capitalism still puts money into the fossil energy industry, still developing new oil fields, new gas fields. It is as if your religion, your capitalism, drives you crazy. It stops you from understanding what the forces of nature, what the laws of nature tell you. I've tried to explain that to you, and yet I wonder why you keep doing that. Speaking in the Azores, islands are wonderful places. You have sun, you have wind, you have the ocean currents, you have the waves. You have all the natural energies, the renewable energies that you want, but you insist on bringing fossil energy products expensively by ship to these islands. You store them on your islands, and then you drive your ships, your outboard engines, you drive your heating systems if you have them, and you drive your cars and your trucks, you drive everything by fossil fuel. But every island is endowed with renewable energy. It would be cheaper to actually convert the island economies and provide land-based electricity to the boats so that you don't have all the emissions and all the noise. The noise disturbs me too. Stop the noise. There are these solutions, and if one group of islands like the Azores can develop that, talk to the Canaries, talk to the Caribbean, talk to Cape Verde, talk to the other islands, because the solutions will be very similar. They will be specific to each island, to each economy, but they will also be very similar. And if you do that in this part of the world, perhaps it spills over into other parts of the world, because you talk about the Atlantic, and in a previous life I've spoken a lot about the Atlantic and making sure that everybody understands how special it is. But now as the ocean, I sense that the Atlantic is connected to the rest of me. So incorporate all the solutions developed in other parts of the world into the solutions that you want to apply in the Atlantic. Understand that you are greatly endowed with great cohesion in this region. You only speak 5 or 6 different languages. All around the Atlantic you can communicate. You all have very similar ideas of what the state should do and what the role of the citizen should be and how the state should behave towards its citizens. You agree on that even if your systems are very different. You agree on your aspirations. That is very similar in the Atlantic space. There is a cultural cohesion, a political, philosophical cohesion that is not shared in the Indian Ocean or in the Pacific Ocean. Here you have that cohesion, and you have the machinery of change, and you have the spiritual thirst of actually getting all of this done. So do it within the Atlantic, but don't forget your connections to the rest of the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Yeah, well, maybe the speed of change is too slow, but also geology uses millions of years as a scale.
I can wait. I can wait. A million years is nothing to me.
I also think people acknowledge is that there are also being done tremendous achievements, even through fossil fuel, to ensure that society is getting to a wealthier level. But I think the very basic is to stick on the principles, pursue, and try to get speed on. But it will be a process and a continuous engagement for that, for sure. But thank you, Mr. Ocean, for your suggestion. And now realities in Africa are very specific as well. What do you think about suggestion for joint action? And maybe one of the things that in Africa could be considered very relevant is how can we build cost-effective options for populations that are under a development process. And according to the UNCLOS, the more technological advanced countries should build capacity on less advanced countries in order to achieve exactly what Andreas is saying. It is impossible without a capacity building and in fact without information sharing, without knowledge sharing, without submarine cables, without optical fibers, and everything we need to connect all of us, including the ports.
Thank you very much. This has been a very delicate debate that how we can collaboratively stem the tide of the effects of climate change and to protect Mr. Ocean. But the first principle of pollution that I know is that polluter pays. The polluter must pay. So we in the developing countries, we have a dilemma where we said that, well, somebody started much earlier than we did, and they have reached a certain level of development. Now they are saying we should all cut or mitigate our development process. How much responsibility did we have in creating this problem? How much should we put into, or how much sacrifice should we make in solving the problem which has no borders, which is global? So that is a conversation that would continue. I know a lot of initiatives have been discussed and are in the formative stages of implementation, like new energy sources that have been mentioned. I know these would have to be peculiar to different areas. I know in West Africa area there, we do not have that much wind, so I'm sorry we might not be able to take that direction. But we have a lot of sunlight and sunshine and heat, and so Where I see us going is solar, the energy. And we know it is being developed. New technologies in solar energy is coming up. I personally at home use solar to probably generate more than half of the energy I use at home. During the day, I generate 10 times what I need. But the policies of the government, they haven't created a system where I can sell the excess back to government. But at the time that I'm consuming from the national grid, I have to pay for it. But the excess that I generate during the day, I have nothing to do with it. So these kind of policies, and in order for vulnerable countries and developing countries to participate effectively, we are going to need support, not just in terms of handouts or resources, but technology transfer, collaboration, and things like that. So I know they say COP30 or however they call it is coming on in Brazil, and the major topic that will be discussed will be support to developing nations. They've talked about carbon trading. I don't believe in it because you are telling me that I should stop my industrialization so that you can up yours, so that you give me some money. Because the quota of carbon generation you gave me, I could not meet it. So you will use my carbon and give me money. That doesn't build resilience for me. So the carbon that I'm not able to produce, come and produce it in my country. Do not produce it in your country and give me money. So that is my problem with that issue about carbon trading and other things. So it needs a lot of conversation. I think continually engaging and everybody, we seeing it as a common threat that has no borders, and the fact that we must, in trying to resolve the problem, no one should be left behind. Yep. It must be such that we continue to develop together, and I think it's the way I think we should go. So thank you.
Thank you, Issa. Now, Susie, we spoke a little bit, we left the door open for planning and the maritime special planning, the realities of your region. ECOWAS wide, please.
Okay, thank you. I would like to start maybe by where my colleague Giancuba stopped. We have to do this without leaving anyone behind. Why? We will not have results unless everybody is included, because it's not worth the Europe or the American countries start a plan to stop polluting and stop this climate change without including Africa. So it really has to be everybody included. But as I said before, to have everybody included, we have to have the same level of knowledge. We cannot start by having people that have lots of information, lots of education, and at the same time having people that have none. In our reality, and I think till now many people doesn't really have the idea in Europe, in Western countries, about the reality of Africa today. We have our difficulties that still doesn't allow us to follow the instructions or the suggestions the developed country give us. As my colleague was saying, one of the main problems we have, if we abandon immediately the fossil energy, probably we will not develop. But why? Because in the past, you developed countries had the chance of using this fossil energy in order to develop. As now, it's very easy to say, let us use the green energy, let us use the solar energy, let us use the hydro energy. But the thing is, do we have the means of implementing this? Do we have the capacity building of implementing it? No. The reality is that we don't have. And we have to respect our reality. Even if we are interested, even if we are willing to do it, we don't have the capacity. We don't have the financial capacity, we don't have the capacity building, we don't have the technicians, and we don't have the technology. Most of our country doesn't even have the energy. So this is our reality. And this is why I say we cannot fight this situation without having capacity building, and collective answers. And this means knowing the reality. Most of our country does know the reality of the developed country because we follow you. But most of the developed country doesn't know the reality of our country. I'm going to give you a very small example. We are speaking about island countries. We spoke about Azores, which are 9 islands. We spoke about, I believe, Cape Verde, which are 10 islands. We can speak about Madeira, which are 2 islands. But most of you, I believe, maybe none of you knows that Guinea-Bissau, which is a very small country, has 88 islands. 88 islands. And people say, what? But this is because most of the developed country doesn't really know the reality of our country. How can we, Guinea-Bissau, control and develop these 88 islands if we don't even have ships, we don't even have boats? So it's very difficult to implement development in these islands and to have them at the same level of not polluting our ocean without having without sharing capacity, without having capacity building, and do it collectively, because what happens in the Bijagos, which is the name of this archipelago, or what happened in Cape Verde, will also affect the developed countries. This is why I think it's the moment of start thinking. It's not their problem, it's a common problem, because it's our common Atlantic Ocean.
Thank you, Susie. Now I will pass to a period of, we may have 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of any answer rising from the audience. I can't see. We have a, okay. Please, can you identify yourself?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Ricardo Tavares da Costa from the European Commission. I have a question. Let me just put it here. For Professor Andreas Kremer, the ocean, will there be a point where you may collapse? What will the future look like in that scenario, and can we recover? Second question, if I may, or I'll pass.
I had difficulties, one, to see you because of the light, and also was a bit difficult to
hear?
Listen. Please, can
So
you just come to the
will
corner here? It is relatively close, and we all can speak like that. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So my question is for Professor Andreas Kremer. Again, will there be a point where you may collapse the ocean? What will the future look like in that scenario, and can we recover? I'm speaking about the AMOC, for example, and the tipping points. Yeah. And then for Professor Dan Hamilton, is the US really coming to a full halt? Or can we still hope for some indirect achievements? Picking up on the US DoD example, can some of its capabilities reduce its emissions by focusing on different selling points, such as reduced heat or noise signals?
Such as?
Heat or noise signals.
Well, Andreas.
The ocean will not collapse. I've seen conditions on this planet that were very different, with much higher energy levels in the distant past when there were no humans. So I won't collapse. I will disappear one day if you keep heating the ocean and the temperature on the surface rises by about 13 to 15 degrees centigrade under your scale, then so much of me will evaporate and will actually leave planet Earth. This is something that has happened to other planets. I will then disappear into outer space and leave you without water, and then life on this planet will stop. That is not me collapsing. I just go somewhere else. It is you, your civilization collapsing. On the way there, however, of immediate concern to you is that there are a number of things within ocean, within me, that are important. One of them you mentioned is the overturning circulation, the fact that I transport heat all around the planet, from the poles to the equator and back again. Not only the heat, more important actually is the nutrients. the biology that I create, that I allow to thrive. And yes, there are a number of things that you call trigger points. There can be a collapse of those overturning circulations. There can be a short-circuiting of the Gulf Stream. It may no longer reach the northeast between Greenland and Norway, but turn around and go to West Africa earlier than it did, in which case this sea area south of the Azores will become permanently much more warm than it is now, and the sea towards the North Sea and the Arctic Sea will become colder again. Those things, they affect you a great deal. To me, I can live either way. There are other areas where the biology within me will collapse. The coral reefs, the tropical coral reefs, they're in danger of dying, and they're in danger of dying faster than I can create new coral reefs further to the south in the southern hemisphere and further to the north in the northern hemisphere. So there are biological systems that may collapse, and that will interfere with the carbon cycle, with the nutrient cycle. And if that happens, that will have an impact on the carbon dioxide composition, concentration in the atmosphere. It will accelerate global heating even more. The most important thing that nobody has mentioned yet is methane. Methane, if your natural gas system has a leakage rate of 3% or higher, then burning natural gas is actually more powerful as a greenhouse effect than the burning of coal. Some of you still believe that natural gas is somehow a bridge fuel that you can use together with renewable energies in order to bring you into a safe future. That is a fallacy. I know, as a force of nature, methane is just as dangerous as carbon dioxide. It's even worse so at the short time scale. And you, humans, you may have the technology, but you do not have the discipline to actually avoid the leakages that will harm the environmental and the climate much more than coal would. So be careful with all of the fossil energy, phase it out as quickly as you can, and put all your money into the renewables. And I tell you, I know that nothing is cheaper than a solar panel with a small smart energy system and a little storage system to power you through day and night, no matter what your needs are. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Just that question. So, within the United States, there's tremendous, obviously, debates. Much of the funding within the United States for some of the initiatives to help deal with climate change are being cut. So that at the federal level will be problematic. But the US innovation economy continues, and all across the society there are huge strides in dealing with climate change solutions. That will continue, but it will be patchy, it'll be uneven now, and it'll remain uncertain for some period of time. So that's the reality in the United States. I think the consequence is the US role within international governance structures. Your question, is it a dead stop? Well, it's close. And so I don't think the traditional multilateral governance approaches to this, COP and all of that, can count on the US being an active participant. In fact, you're going to find an active antagonist. And I think that changes back the point. You have to prepare for a different issue now. The COP process, for instance, had gotten most countries, even if they weren't maintaining their commitments, to kind of be ashamed of it. And they were explaining why they couldn't do it. But if you have a major power in the United States, and I think I would add Russia sort of has a similar approach to that, absolutely just rejecting the whole thing, then many other countries, they don't have to feel so ashamed anymore of why they're not meeting commitments. They just line up behind them. So I think that process has some real challenges now. And then we come to the last piece, which is our Atlantic thing. I would just be very pragmatic. I think the US will engage on lots of issues, but it'll be reactive. Climate change is a threat multiplier. The threats we face, back to the topic here, maritime security and so on, the the number, the scope, the nature of maritime security activities is expanding and it's changing in part because of climate change. It's not getting less, it's getting more. Those naval missions will become more, they will become very different, and the question will be, to what extent can you count on the US Navy or the Coast Guard to be part of those with you or not? And I think you won't be able to know, because it'll be event by event driven. It won't be driven by some strategy. The strategy was put in the garbage can last month. And so it'll be reactive. As I said, 170 events over the last 3 years in which the US military is involved in climate change activities. That's not going to go away, but it'll be driven now more by, helter-skelter type of reaction rather than anything that's designed. And I think that's just what we're going to live with. And again, the implication for US partners in the Atlantic or elsewhere is, where do you think you will be able to work with your counterparts, and where is there going to be a hole that, frankly, you're going to have to fill somewhere else? That's a sober message, but I think that's what we have to deal with.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I think okay.
Hi.
Okay, please.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth, and I'm a doctoral student at University of Oxford. First, thank you for this roundtable. What I take from the roundtable is we clearly can see the issues from the developing and developed country perspective. And I had two angles to this question, but Professor Hamilton already answered part of it, because I was going to ask, what exactly can the international regime do to firm up commitments? Unlike other aspects, maybe armed conflict, for instance, climate change, is just an area where it seems the international community cannot exactly agree. And Vice Admiral Yakubu already gave us an indication of the perceived unfairness of what climate requests are internationally. So I was going to ask Vice Admiral Yakubu or Foreign Secretary Barbosa, what do you think, what would a fair approach, especially for developing countries, actually look like? In order that we can move forward. That's apart from capacity building, which, doesn't necessarily, we can't necessarily say, it's giving us exactly the results we want. So what does a fair approach look like in terms of the developing country perspective? Thank you.
You, please.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. This is a conversation that I said that has to continue going, because as we are discussing all these strategies, they have impacts in stopping the use of fossil fuel, as we have said. But you come to developing countries, some of particularly we in sub-Saharan Africa, and you see the level of poverty, the lack of healthcare, lack of education, lack of everything. And then so we cannot wait 1 million years to save you, Mr. Ocean, I'm sorry. What we can do is a collaborative and shared responsibility, that the new technologies that are coming, we need those who are already there, the developed countries, to come and invest in our countries in order to support us to be able to meet up to our responsibilities in saving the climate. As I said, there are new technologies that have been mentioned by the professors, and including solar energy and other things, which we have a lot in our place. But do we have the resources and the technology? So the technology transfer, that will make it easier for us to also be part of saving the planet. Otherwise, we will continue to drill in order to save the... We are thinking about the people living today, not those who will come in 1 million years' time. They must live to produce those who will be alive in 1 million years. So there needs to be a lot of partnerships and collaboration. And I think COP30 must define the way. to keep. I know there are bigger so-called developing countries in Southeast Asia and other places who are now also major polluters, but who want to be considered as developing countries and also to be allowed. Those things have to be looked at. Who is really vulnerable and who really needs or doesn't have the technology and other resources to be able to meet up to its responsibilities. So it has to be a global solution, and which leaves no one behind. So we'll keep going back to the fact that whatever strategies are developed must not leave anyone behind. It must make sure that we keep developing, and then in order to keep our people safe. And they will not forgive our governments if they go and sign on to anything that denies them the healthcare, the education, and then the average living conditions that they deserve. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Is there also 2 questions? Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Rui Martins. I'm a Regional Director for Maritime Policies of the Azores government. I'll be fast because the Edo Flad also has a question. I would like to put the focus a bit on a different subject that has to do with the fact that, for instance, in the Azores we define 30% of marine protected areas. But I would like to know what kind of commitment can we expect from the signatories of the Atlantic Center, for instance, the countries that signed this agreement, in order to respect the definition, whatever country of these countries that defines these kind of areas based on science. Because, the ocean doesn't have boundaries, biodiversity doesn't have boundaries, or at least they don't read our boundaries. But the idea, and since we based it in science, is that we believe and we think that the mountains and the areas that we define are actually will probably bring an input in maybe restoring some of these, of the environment and of the ocean. And so that's the question, like what kind of commitment? Because as of now, the fisheries, for instance, kind of overpower whatever we define, because the countries can still fish, because there's a lot of treaties, even UNCLOS, UNCLOS, the US didn't ratify it. They kind of follow a bit, but not many countries actually, they don't respect it. It's not mandatory. So that's what I would like to know. It's what kind of commitment can we expect from these countries at least?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you to Hall for this very passionate discussion. And I think it's really, really important to start this 50 maritime security course. Regarding fishery, regarding the Atlantic Center, as probably you know, or if you know, I explained, last year the subject and the theme that all the Atlantic Center countries approved, it was the Ahayou fishing in the wide Atlantic. And how can this now 27 countries address this? And because we need more action than words, we, for instance, produce a report, an annual report regarding this issue, sharing some ideas, some common issues on this Atlantic basin area. It's not only for all the ocean, Kramer, but it's for the Atlantic basin. So yes, if I can say, we are looking for that also, we are working on that, but we are working mainly in all the common challenge that we have in face of us in this our space that is the Atlantic basin. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm the president of FLAT, the Luso-American Foundation. My question is simple. It's to Dan Hamilton. You had a word on the lack of action around the Atlantic compared to the Pacific or even the Indian Ocean, you said. My question is, if you accept that a part of the answer is in the relation from Europe and the United States with the Atlantic. I mean, for too long, considering like a private pond that didn't concern anyone else and plus didn't present any problem. And if so, if you think that considering now, as for instance, the United States are evaluating too, considering the Atlantic Ocean as a whole, I mean the entire rectangular of the Atlantic, how can that make a difference? Obviously, Portugal has a private interest on that, because if we look at the Atlantic as so, as a rectangular, 3 of the 4 corners speak Portuguese. So obviously we are interested on that. Plus, we have a strong will to go on that direction, but I would like to have your comment on that. Thank you.
Please. Yes, okay, so it's good to see you, first of all, thank you. This is the bigger picture question, not just climate change, but why Atlantic at all, right? Yep. You know, for many years, when we spoke of globalization, most people meant the Pacific, and they really almost meant China. You know, and so there was a book by a renowned Singaporean diplomat, Kishore Mahbubani, called The Asian Hemisphere. It got a lot of attention. Well, Asian Hemisphere, I mean, by definition, if there's an Asian hemisphere, then there is an Atlantic hemisphere. It's just a definitional thing. So why all the focus on one part of the globe when we talk about globalization, when there's another half of it that we're somehow not talking about in terms of what globalization is? The New York Times columnist Tom Friedman, quick definition for him of globalization is how continents connect. Well, the 4 continents of the Atlantic are connecting. They've been connecting for a long time, but the connections they're building are accelerating in ways that are not only distinctive, but are in some cases far ahead of where other ocean basins are. And yet the governance structures, the kind of mechanisms we have, don't match that. But they do in the Asia Pacific. It's arguably far more diverse area of the world than the Atlantic. And bigger. The Pacific's a much bigger place. And yet, for 35 years now, APEC has been going strong. APEC is not just annual summits of world leaders. It is a whole network of business activities, of all sorts of things that they do. They have created those fusion centers. They've done so many things among countries that are at odds with each other, all the time. And in the Indian Ocean, there's much more in that terms of, again, among countries that really don't get along, yet they manage some things that seems to not be happening here. And I think part of it is historical. There is a tremendous colonial legacy. We have to be honest about that prohibits this. I think the first world, third world, second world, dynamics are still very strong. I think there is a reaction, as you say, in the North Atlantic. For us, we say transatlantic, we only mean the North, and we interact and forget the South. But I think there's an equivalent dynamic in the South, that the Southern Ocean is somehow, you don't want the Northerners involved. That's an ideological, historical block that has stopped us from seeing actually how we need to deal with things. And so my whole pitch, and there are a number of initiatives, and I mentioned some of them, including the Atlantic Center, but many others that are trying to now bridge that gap. We have a problem right now of some political dynamics, but if you look at where we need to do this, we need to think very clearly, we have a common ocean. It's our common heritage. We have to work on that together because it doesn't respect those boundaries, And as I said, there are some issues specific to the Atlantic Ocean that other ocean basins don't have. With the Gulf Stream, the carbon sinks, the thermohaline system of the planet, much of it is located here, not in the Pacific. So we don't do it, it's not going to get done. That's just the ocean. As I said, the digital and energy build out, if you want to connect almost 1 billion more people to energy, sustainable energy, and to the internet, that has to happen in the southern Atlantic. It is Africa and South America. That's the parts of the world that don't have that access yet. And that build out is happening now. We've been building so much east-west, the build is now going south. There's a conference in Lisbon last year, they're going to have it again in October, called Atlantic Convergence. And I was at that. 700 digital companies coming to Lisbon to talk about going south with digital. The problem now, if you're going to do that, you have huge energy needs to build out all of those data centers and cables. So solving the energy data nexus for me right now is a key Atlantic issue. We all have to work on that. We could deal with some of the things that Andreas has been talking about if we can solve that. So that's a very practical thing. I don't think it requires governments necessarily. It requires our wherewithal. So there are, any number of things that I think require a Atlantic vision. And if I may say, because I've dealt with my Spanish colleagues, if I may say, who say the same thing you just did, except their triangle is different. We have to get beyond those historical connections. They're strong, so the Lusophone countries have a strong connection. But if you only work within the Lusophone community, you're missing the Atlantic community. And I say the same to my Spanish colleagues too. So we all have to think Atlantic, pan-Atlantic. That to me is the term. And then start to focus in on what specifically we could do to address some of these challenges. And human security, just to end on that, since the Admiral told me to say human security. Just an example, the guns come down from North America, the drugs come up from South America, they go over to West Africa, they give all of Africa a drug problem it didn't have before, and they come back up to Europe because that's where the demand is. It's an Atlantic problem. There is no mechanism to deal with that problem. We have northern Coast Guards, southern Coast Guards. We have no Atlantic Coast Guard Functions Forum, which could be created. Things like that. I think we need to expand our mind on the possible. Sorry, but it got me going.
No, Mr. Ocean was aware of something that...
I'm not sure whether I'm speaking as Mr. Ocean when I respond to the president of the Luso-American Foundation for Development by saying that your question is actually a challenge that would be a great theme for a project that FLAD could do, your foundation could do. Invite some of the thinkers, let them speak about it, let them discuss it, let them write book chapters and publish a book. And do that in memory and in honor of Charles Buchanan, who has done so much to bring us all together into this room and who still is, we're all waiting for FLAD's response in order to have that lighthouse project, that book publication that Charles Buchanan, Buck Buchanan, would have triggered himself, because there are two things that he really loved doing. One is to invite people to get to talk and then publish a book afterwards. And then the other one is to invite people over dinner with lots of wine. And those two things you should take up and do in his memory and his honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. And we celebrate Buck as a good opportunity for so. Please, Admiral, just a quick
one. Just to add to what Professor Andreas said, and also related to the question that I had. We have we have a lot of conflict in the Sahel, and it's all due to lack of resources, part of which is because of these climate change issues. But these are vast, ungoverned spaces with lots of solar energy. Why can't the Atlantic or even globally as a community, think about taking over these ungoverned spaces, build huge solar farms, manage it for the whole world, create those energy gaps that we say we need to solve before we can do other things. So I was just thinking about it. They are conflict areas because they are ungoverned spaces, and they are huge. And it is a very hot area that if we use it as a solar area, that will bring government into that area, produce the energy that we need to power the whole world, as well as solve other problems, help the globe. So that's what I just thought I should add.
Okay, thank you, Vice Admiral. We finished the session. I'd like to thank the speakers for your tremendous way of transmitting messages. I think the audience was paying a lot of attention to your ideas and to your opportunities. It has been a pleasure also for me to be involved in this discussion. And I hope you have enjoyed so much as I did myself. So thank you very much for the tremendous panel again. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go?
Sr. Almirante, podemos dar por terminado? Okay, thank you very much to all the panelists and to all the audience. I would now ask you gently to, if we can have a group photo outside in the stairs in front of the building, and then afterwards our team that is outside will direct you to the buses that will lead us to the lunch. Thank you very much to all.